However, he's begged her to sleep with him just once so he can die knowing what it's like to make love to someone he was truly in love with. My wife tells me all of this and I chuckle a bit until I see the look on her face. She's considering doing it. She feels terrible about not returning those feelings for all those years and feeling like she led him on and used him. She keeps telling me it'll only be one time, with a rubber. She feels like she's denying him his dying wish and claims she couldn't live with herself knowing this. And the only thing I could do was respond, "Please say you're joking," and she shook her head. In that moment I got up from the table and started packing. My wife's guy best friend is dying and his final wish is to sleep with her, and she's thinking of going through with it. While my current wife and I were dating, she had this guy friend we'll call Neil. She introduced him to me right away and I got weird vibes from him from the start. He says he used to have a crush on my wife when they were in middle school, but over time he said he got over it. His actions showed otherwise though, as he used to go out on lunch dates alone with her twice a month or so. I did ask my wife about this, but she always assured me that Neil was her best friend, and he never tried being inappropriate with her in any way. I trusted my wife's words. There was one occasion that Neil tried to hold her hand when we were all out together, but I shot it down and confronted him about it. This alone made me seriously suspect that Neil was into her, at least slightly, regardless of what my now wife had to say. As my wife and I's relationship progressed and we started talking about marriage, Neil's own relationship had fallen apart, and he was leaning pretty heavily on my wife for support. Here's where things started to really make me uncomfortable. For context, my wife is a nice person to a fault and a people pleaser. Unfortunately, this got her into some abusive relationships in the past where guys took advantage of her in many ways. Neil was always the one to have her back and a couple times even helped her get away from those dudes. He was a great friend, but he always had a bit of an ulterior motive. Neil is a borderline nice guy. My worries about Neil persisted all the way throughout my wife and I's engagement. So a week before our wedding, we had gone out with some friends, and Neil was in the group. After some drinking, Neil overheard another couple talking about how they liked the idea of an open relationship and sleeping with other people, and Neil decided a week before our wedding would be a great time to try and convince my wife to hop on the open relationship train and have some fun with him before getting married to me. To her credit, my wife came to me right away with this because she found it not just weird on the surface but also the fact he made sure to only talk about it when it was just the two of them. I confronted him right away and immediately kicked him out of the wedding. He was really upset by this and started telling my wife I was just as controlling and abusive as her previous boyfriends. However, she's nice to a fault, so she leaves the heavy lifting to me when it comes to dealing with these kinds of conflicts. He had to go. I explained to her I wasn't going to start off our marriage with this guy who tried to sleep with her in our lives. She fought me on this a bit, obviously, since she knew him for 15 years at this point, but after what was probably our biggest fight ever, she finally understood that his presence wasn't good for us as a couple, and blocked him on everything. To my surprise, he actually went away for a long time. Wife would hear about him from mutual friends once in a while, and we learned he got married at one point, had a baby, lost it, then got divorced in the span of a couple years. Then we found out the real reason his wife left him. Even after losing the baby, I guess they were gonna stay together until he found out he had terminal brain cancer. I guess he called his wife from the doctor with the news, and when he got home she was already packing her things. My wife wanted to reach out to him. I felt for the guy, I really did, so we unblocked him and reached out. He was happy to hear from us and we started hanging out a bit again. And this is where it gets really bad. He had a seizure a couple weeks ago and his doctors informed him he doesn't have a lot of time left. Couple months at best. Upon hearing this news, he decides to declare his undying love for my wife. Been in love with her since the day he met her, but she never felt that way back. However, he's begged her to sleep with him just once so he can die knowing what it's like to make love to someone he was truly in love with. My wife tells me all of this and I chuckle a bit until I see the look on her face. She's considering doing it. She feels terrible about not returning those feelings for all those years and feeling like she led him on and used him. She keeps telling me it'll only be one time, with a rubber. She feels like she's denying him his dying wish and claims she couldn't live with herself knowing this. Not gonna lie, I started yelling a little. I tell her he's being just as manipulative and abusive as those guys she used to get mixed up with, and this is the same thing he tried to pull before we got married. She's crying and doesn't know what to do. I tell her in no uncertain terms that if she goes through with this, we're done. We had recently been trying for a baby and that's now on hold because of this. My head is spinning. She knows this is something I won't allow to happen and stays with her after the fact. My life is falling apart and I'm so angry at this guy. Using his terminal illness of all things to try to get my wife in bed with him before he goes to hell, because trust me, if there is one, he deserves to go there for doing this. She's been crying all day. She's avoiding me and probably thinks I'm a monster. I told her if she ever cared about our marriage she wouldn't have even considered this, and how she's acting now has me doubting her entirely. I have no idea how to handle this from here. So for the next little while, my wife and I did not speak very much. Our communication and relationship got so bad that I actually started sleeping in the guest bedroom, and eventually I moved out of our bedroom, and my wife and I became sort of housemates. We didn't discuss anything, not even work or household chores. This ate me up inside, I have to say, and I did try to talk to my wife about it, but she could not understand my point of view. But he's dying, she would say over and over again. As if him dying gives him free access to my wife whenever she pleases. One of the times she tried to use this argument, I retorted back saying, "What so if I get diagnosed with terminal brain cancer? Should I have the right to go out and rob a bank?" "Oh, but I'm dying. I've never robbed a bank before and I really want to do it. Please, Mr. Police Officer, look the other way, I'm dying." I understand that this remark of mine was extremely sarcastic, but I felt as if it was a valid point. She did not see it that way, however, as she refused to continue talking about it. Well, a few weeks ago I came home from work expecting silence, but instead I was greeted with a lovely homemade dinner, romantic candles set up everywhere and a warm atmosphere. This was a complete 180 from what I have been living for the past month, so I asked my wife what was up. When she told me she felt compelled to do this, I knew something was up. My intuition was fearing the worst, that she had slept with Neil after all, but I did not want to let these thoughts consume me, so I approached this dinner with an open mind. Maybe she had realized she's been wrong all this time and this was her attempt to make up for it. Well, halfway through dinner, she said there is something she needed to tell me. When she said that, my heart dropped, and I almost like I knew what she was about to say. So, I'm just going to be blunt as possible here. You asked me why I set up this dinner for us. And it's because I want you to see that I really love you. Yes, I slept with Neil. But that's all I did. I left his apartment right after because I felt disgusted with myself right after. You're the love of my life and I want you and only you. I sat there shell-shocked, in disbelief at what I just heard. She actually went through with it, and the only thing I could do was respond, "Please say you're joking," and she shook her head. In that moment I got up from the table and started packing my bags, refusing to speak to her. I knew I was done. She tried to stop me, she begged for forgiveness, and she even tried to barricade the door by trying to nail a wooden plank from our shed to it, but there was nothing she could do to stop me from leaving. I have started the divorce process and I've been living with my parents for the past 3 weeks and I'm looking for a place of my own.